kindergarten.
Oh, well, that would be many, many years ago. Okay. Well, Susan, I'm just going to talk for a second and then bring up my slides and go from there. Susan asked me to talk to you guys, and we talked about, you know, topics and how to proceed, and she mentioned journey and process. So I thought a lot about those two things, and I thought I would focus on process, and I will explain as I go through the different meanings of process that I was thinking. So I'm ready to share screen.
Okay.
Okay, everybody see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so I was thinking that journey and process are quite similar. And a lot of times when we talked about art as artists and we talk about the process, we tend to talk about the physical process, the tangible techniques. And so I want to start with a series that began many years ago. Since then, these small mixed media sculptures have continued. I'm still continuing to make them. But as I was making them, people kept asking me, what are they about? And I was a little confused, and I thought, well, you know, I'm just making them. I'm, you know, my body and my mind is just working and I'm responding. And then I thought, well, that's not a sufficient answer for most people. So I said process, because I could then talk about materials, and that I use a lot of alternative materials and processes that I have developed. And so I'll just flip through. These small sculptures that I started, I titled Cryptic Species. After I had created all of them, I had no idea what they were. And here are a few of them. Some of them are more labor intensive than others. Well, as I was going through these, let's look at a picture. As I was going through making these and thinking about it and having people ask me, and also, you know, with applying to galleries, getting grants in the academic field, there's a real strong, you have to have a concept, you have to have the idea behind it. And so I began to lean more towards a side that is analytical. They're about observation, they're about naming and classification, they're biological, they are, you know, about us wanting to recognize and name something so we know it, but when people view them, they're not classified, they're elusive. And so I kept going with that idea. And it wasn't until I started trying to name them with that point. And I'll just name off a few. Many edges, continued growth, revealing interior. So I was using these names to further that concept. They accumulated over many years. You'll see here that they began in 2009, and I first created an installation of all of 37 of them at that point in 2016. I'm still making them. And I realized that when you see them together in an exhibition setting, that they take on a new meaning, have a new context, and they're not isolated anymore. and they have relationships to them. And so as we go along and look at some of these shots, I began thinking more about process because I had told people they were about process. But the thing that kept coming up in my mind was, wow, to me, they have a personal meaning. They begin, as I begin to think about the process, the physical process, the way materials move, interact, say, no, I won't do that. Mark and I have talked about this when, you know, the idea of what if I mix these two, kind of an alchemical thing. It began to sink in and make me think of them as a metaphor. It was so fluid, the metaphor of how I think, you know, how I react, how I work, how I don't work. So there was a very personal aspect to this that I never really revealed in talking about them. This is the third installation of these pieces. They were on I created 2 long tables that were supposed to be end to end. In the exhibition shot I'm going to show you, I had not enough space. I had to make them into a corner. The tables are at a counter height, and they are in a quasi environment provided by 150 pounds of black sand. Very close in proximity because I didn't want there to be any possible way for them to be viewed isolated. And here you can see, and they're very tall and very skinny. So it would be very easy to lean over and look at them. On an interesting note, every time I've showed this, people cannot help themselves by touching the sand. There's always fingerprints in the sand. I'll come back to the pieces on the walls. So the title that I came up with was, these pieces were called Cryptic Species. And I am continuing to make them, not as, you know, as quickly and diligently as I was to create them for exhibition. But they also were in combination. I like to do drawings as well. And so here are a few examples of drawings where I am imagining, again, I am sketching, I am enjoying the mark making, I am enjoying the form. And then when I back off in retrospect, without an intent, I begin to see that they are doing the same thing. They are similar. And also in a way, I like to have a certain amount of space in my drawings around each object. So these were a bit of an extension of that. I have other ones that I didn't want to put in here for time's sake. So I believe for these ones, there's about 5 of them. Now, I didn't put in, we all make mistakes getting ready for a lot of things. And so some of these don't have sizes, but I'll give you the size on this. These are 9 by 9 inches. I was also playing around with watercolor, seeing what it would do. And I'll go forward and I'll show you something that is partial. There's about 3 of these, and they are, it'll show you kind of how I got to the point of this, because I did not imagine these forms in the beginning. I was playing with circles of paint and seeing how watercolor would swirl around and blend. And I had gotten a new watercolor set from Japan. It was really cool. And then I started thinking about what I could do with them. And this also shows pretty clearly that a lot of my work has a lot of detail in it that I really respond to on a emotional level of being really focused in on the work and having the rest of the world kind of recede while I do it. So here's another one, and I'm actually going to zoom in. I'm going to go back. This is the finished one. And you can see the details of the lines. And then if I go forward, you can see that these lines don't have the same type of weight to them. And you can see where I started. There were just blobs of fun color combinations and sizes and shapes. And then thinking, oh, well, you know, I'll separate this light part right here. I'll separate this green part. And I began to notice that I could make these circular organic forms. So those are kind of some, a couple of examples of drawings that were happening simultaneously. They're very small. These ones right here are 4 by 6. The other one was, you know, other ones were 9 by 9. So they're actually easy to take out to the countertop in the kitchen and watch television with my husband and work on them outside of the studio. They're a release. I do quite a number of drawings outside of what I show to the public, to colleagues, that I find very personal. And I'll get to that in the end. But these are the ones at this point that I was willing to show. And I'm sure that many artists, I don't know if you have experienced this, where we find that there is a line of what we will show to the public and what we won't show to the public, whether we think it's good or not. I don't know if any of you have experienced that. So the sculptures then sort of morphed into what I was making smaller pieces. I was making, and let me circle around here. I was making these things and then these things. And I had these small wooden cradle boards that you can put on the wall, paint on, and I thought, oh, that would be interesting if I put those on that. And so there became this idea of the mixed media sculptures being on the wall, quasi three-dimensional, high relief, however you want to classify it. And so these were the first 3, and those measure 4 by 4 inches. Let me go back. So as part of the idea of process, aside from the evolution as an artist, the process of our feelings and how we approach or are blocked in the studio, we come back to, you know, the traditional idea that people ask, you know, how did you make that? What materials did you make? So here I have a couple where I have progression shots. But here is the one of the small ones that you saw in its like 3rd stage, where I had made the pieces, I adhered them, and it was completely white. And I have to say that I have this love for completely white sculptures and objects, and very flat, but maybe that's a future project, like completely black ones and completely white ones and maybe some gray ones. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 wall sculptures that are not finished and tell you why they are not finished. This is a box that has been dyed, and I have put a medium weight gel medium and taken a there's these little pouches. I get a lot of stuff from hardware stores and hobby stores. They're pouches that brides use to put almonds or candy in and then tie them up and give them out as favors. I squished it onto this box. The box is 6 inches by 6 inches. These were objects that were made separate. As part of the process, as part of you understanding a working method, my pieces, I work on 2 to 5 at a time. I have a large table. My materials are spread across the table. I get interested in a medium. I think, oh, what if I try this? I make little pieces. They sit in a box. So for example, anybody here familiar with Tyvek? Mailing papers that have that plastic material that you can't tear. They are plastic, they're plastic paper with extruded fibers that don't have a warp and a weft. They're multi-directional. When you heat them up with an iron, they pucker like this. They'll either one side will have indentations, the other side will have, like you will see here, bubbles. So I cut some shapes. And I thought, oh, these would be fun to glue together. I'll dye them with my fiber reactive dyes. I want an interesting color that's slightly darker on the outside, and they sat. And then I dyed this. They sat apart for a little while, and I thought, I think those would work on that piece. I had tried them on 3 different pieces. So I'm showing you here that I am adhering them. Now, this, for me, is not quite ready to be published online or shown in an exhibition. I feel there needs to be, in my mixed media work, one of the biggest things for me, aside from balancing proportional aspects and looking at either contrasting or similar textures, there is a very specific idea of transitions. When you're working with multiple pieces, multiple colors, multiple textures, transition points can be really, really important. So for me right now, these transition points between these objects and this very rectangular surface, even though it has a slight texture on it, it needs more of a transition. Okay. So we all also, I say we all, I'm assuming, I do. I have a lot of pieces that I'm working on. They turn out well. I work on another one side by side. I see something and I end up trying something. This was flat. I added the texture. I didn't like the colors. I spray painted it white. That's a flat white, so it'll accept liquid, medium. Then I spray painted and dyed and added more and dyed on the one on the left. And I thought, well, that really doesn't work. So, you know, there's a third layer. And then I took silk and burned it. And I thought, well, I'll lay this over that. And I tried it and it really didn't work. And then I put white on top of the tubes, which is actually puff paint. Wonderful thing to play around with in the hobby section. And I was going to continue that there. And no, that didn't work. So we're on our 5th iteration of putting things on there. And then I decided, screw it. I'm going to put great foam all around this. I've worked with it in the past, but having not worked with it in a long time, I forgot how little you should put on compared to how much it expands. So it expanded more than I thought. So then I thought, well, I will paint it flat black to push it back in and not be so prominent. So here I am, and let me tell you, it's a bitch getting down in underneath all of this stuff. I think I have. So here it's painted, but I haven't gotten all the things underneath. I have changed the colors of the white round tops. And on the side, I've done some experimentation with black puff paint that I'm thinking of doing this. And at this point, I have hung it back on the wall and am ignoring it because that's what happens when I put on layers and layers and layers, and I realize that it's not flowing, it's not working for some reason, and I need to not work on it. So that's another part of the process. That also is why I work on multiple pieces and multiple series. So there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's about 10 of those wall sculptures, all in various stages. And I jokingly said to my husband, I'm going to hang a sheet over them. They're all on the wall in my studio, so I don't even see them. But sometimes it's really good to see them because I think about a technique that I used on those that I might use on something else, which is one of the primary things in my work, this kind of visual, I'm thinking of the term, translation technique to another form. Okay. Then there's my love of texture and color. And I've always been working with applying this to objects. And sometimes being lucky to teach art, I think one of the things that happens is, as I'm explaining or showing, I get an idea. I was teaching a mixed media class, which was so wonderful until we couldn't teach it anymore. And a couple of these pieces were sample pieces where I was showing different techniques on really, very inexpensive canvases. And I had bought, and I thought, oh, well, they're cheap, I'll go buy more. And I've got all this material and I'll try this. And it grew. I believe there are 21 pieces, I don't know. And I call them samples. And Mark, were you the one that I talked to about showing them, framing them, not framing them? And he said, leave the edges. And I'm like, brilliant. That's part of the process. So I've shown them a number of times in this organization. And they're now on loan, being exhibited, or on loan. And so here are a few, they're all 12 by 12 inches. And here are a few individual ones, and then I made a couple of slides that came in and showed detail. So here I would think it was very appropriate to talk about materials, talking to somebody who was interested or I was showing my work, because again, they are so much about the materials because the materials are making the texture. So really briefly, the parts up here that you're seeing that are kind of shiny with lines, the base layer was electrical tape that you might put around ductwork. And then there's some mediums on there, and actually these parts were actually mistakes that turned out great because the paint wasn't dry and I did something and it peeled up and I thought, wow, that looks cool. I'm going to do it in another place. Those lovely, happy accidents. The shiny parts, I use a lot of fiber reactive dyes from my background, and my master's degree was in fibers. And here I was playing simply with fiber reactive dyes, very, very, very fine particles of dyes, and water and glue, and water and glue in a variety of proportions. And sometimes it's not the material, sometimes it's technique. You can see right here, this is a modeling paste where I just kept putting my finger in it. I don't know if you've ever done that with icing, where you put your finger in it and the icing comes up as a bit of a point. I know people who cook use this. So it makes a really lovely texture. Am I doing okay on time? There's some close-ups of textures. So a series that I want to start working on, I have 3 pieces that I'll show you that are very large. I've not ever done these textures very large. The series will be completely about just texture, but more than the idea of the samples. Partly because I'm using some of the ideas from the samples, and also how to translate doing something on a certain size into what do I do when it's on a much larger size. So just some textures I've created. I don't know if you've ever used Crackle Paste, but this is Crackle Paste, and this is hot glue. This is one of the large pieces which is not finished. The 2 pieces that I'm going to show you, this is 34 inches by 38 and a half. That gets fuzzy, pixely. Anyway, this piece, both those pieces are reclaimed, and I have done this with about 3 or 4 previous series or pieces of artwork, and I have a couple of past series that I'm going to reclaim, repurpose. I like that idea. I haven't sold them. I've had them for 15 years, 20 years. They're surfaces. I can use them. So there were a lot of layers aside from the swirly whitish things. The rest of it is a whole bunch of layers of stuff that I was trying to cover up a piece and I didn't like it, so I sanded it. This one isn't quite finished. I'm sorry, I don't have details. Some of the texture work, I've realized is very difficult. Quite a lot of my work is very difficult to document with photographs. And here is a third piece, which is just started. Okay, do I have time?
Yes, you're fine on time.
Okay. So all the work that I showed you up until this point was work that, while it had a meaning, like I explained, a thing that I told other people to satisfy them, which was true, there was also a personal meaning that wasn't necessarily visible. The work, I have to thank Susan for this, because being part of the group and the things that are going on in my life kind of merged. And I'm going to lead you through that. So here is a small drawing, and I'm going to talk about the process. I'm coming back to leaves. I've drawn leaves in past. Leaves have been a symbol, an object in my work for 30 years now, in and out. Second phase on the left, third phase on the right, fourth phase on the left. You can start seeing here some repetition of the actual negative space in between the leaves, and then working on how to deal with that negative space and how it comes into the square. And more color to it. And this is just a quick shot. Bit more pattern, which was what I was traditionally doing with them. These pieces, you might recognize them. There's 3 of them with Susan right now. I'm working on I'm finishing up the 4th. And I was enjoying, again, the surface underneath that black was a whole process. It turned out to look very much like encaustic, and I was enjoying that very much. And I liked the black and the flat, and I liked flat things. And I didn't tend to do a lot of flashy, brilliant, sparkly, or shiny. And I hadn't worked on it for a while. And I went, one was half done. The other 2 were finished. And I started to use black on it, and the black didn't match. And I went through every black in my studio, and none of it matched. And I thought, I am not repainting all 3 of these. So I painted it in, and I got some extremely high gloss spray, and I sprayed them. You can't see it here, but in person, they're incredibly shiny. And I was okay with that. It was really fascinating. I was like, wow, that's interesting. I would never have tried that had that issue not presented itself. Now you can see some reflection there, and there is some texture to the surfaces there. And there is a new one. And there is a new one. So like I have 4 more slides. Like I was saying, with joining with Susan and being part of this group and having those pieces, which were very much fun, decorative, material exploration, hearkening to past. I started playing around with leaf shapes again, but this also is happening during a difficult time in my life where my father is he's elderly and he's having issues. He's having physical issues and he's having memory issues. And I'm trying to connect and care for him. And I have difficulty with that. So maybe you can start to see what I'm dealing with here. And I didn't realize what I was doing until after I had finished these pieces. I did not think they were about me and my relationship with my father. I'm the center one, and my connection points are whole and complete. My father is the one furthest away, and the outline and the connection points are fading. I'm working on this one. I don't know where it's going. I've already erased things and then drawn things. I'm trying to let it happen naturally like the first one and not force it and go, oh, what's my relationship like? What should this symbolize? And, you know, so when I find myself doing that, I just erase it. This piece was already complete. It happened right after the first one in graphite. And again, I realized that because they happened simultaneously and I was just doing something in color and something in graphite, that I really didn't know that this was about my father and myself, and about deep emotions and interpersonal relationships that you want to hide, you don't want to tell people about. My father and I are on the left. He's the big, larger than life one on the top. I am the smaller one on the bottom. And how I see him right now is the one on the right and the void. This is the second colored piece. I like to work in circles a lot. And when I started working on this one, I thought, you know, my father and I are very alike, and there are places and things that we are very alike, and then there are places where we aren't. So there we go. Do you want to see anything or ask me any questions?
Elizabeth, why don't you unshare your screen and then we'll bring up everyone so we can have a conversation about that.
How's that?
That's great. That's great. So I know we're all moved by, you know, the power of your imagery, and I just want to thank you for sharing that today. Sharing a little bit about your journey as well as the process.
I really thought about those two words.
But I think we'll just open it up for conversation. Any questions for Elizabeth? Any comments on the presentation, on her work?
I make an initial comment that even with details you cannot see your work, they are so full of senses, and it's sensual, sensory, whatever, it's sensory no matter what. They are bombarded with all this wonderful detail, colors, different shapes, different everything that is really difficult to see,
It's
even in these JPEGs.
I know, and you know, Mark, it is almost impossible to get some of this documentation, and I haven't quite tried video documentation, but you're right. The impact of them dramatically drops when you are not in person.
Well, and like Lawrence has shown us, and a number of people have, you can take a two-dimensional object and do that video, and because you're able to kind of stack the deck with the right angle, with the whatever, that would help. Yes, and even have a 5-second video, in almost like an animated GIF that shows you what it looks like.
I'll get Ray right on that.
Yes. I have to sit in the background looking for something to do. But look at behind her, and you'll see this her whole studio is like an apothecary. It's got everything up on the wall of all these different compounds, and it's right up my alley because I enjoy that element of it, that alchemical element.
Yeah.
But, all of the different textures. I mean, you make me want to figure out how to do some of these as
I know.
Because I deal a lot with texture as well, but in almost one-dimensional texture because it's all just modeling paste. And now, anyway.
So hey, Mark, how do you feel about sharing your processes?
But one day, Susan's asked me to do one of these Zooms, and one day I think I will. Yes.
You know, like your techniques, like this is how to do it. You know, I love telling people how, you know, what it's made out of and kind of how I do it. And, you know, I was tempted because I love to go online and watch videos of people making things. Gives me ideas. I don't copy them. It just is really, but you know, I thought, oh, what if I start a YouTube channel, and what if I made these tutorial videos or just process videos? And then I was like, oh, I'm giving away my secrets. You know, but I do it in class to an extent. And I do it with friends. So it's really interesting. You know, people want to know. People really want to know.
When we started your website years ago, the first iteration, you were going to have a section there in what we were calling a visual journal.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
Everything that you just talked about it would never fit as a two-dimensional slideshow. It would have to have been a video. Now I'm just FYI.
Well, hey, I am going to do video stuff. I know I sent you some videos.
Video.
Yeah, very basic, learn how to. But I'm very fascinated with that because the processes, you're right, the process is very difficult to capture solely two-dimensionally. But I just want to point out here that, again, even artists are just really so drawn to the process. That's what they want to talk about. Right?
How many of you want to talk about the process?
Because I think it's easier to maybe to explain a process than to really explain what are your thoughts and your inspiration, because process is physical, and like you say, you can make a video, but it's much more complicated to explain why are you making art, where did it come from, why are you still doing it? I mean, so that's what I feel it's a good way to start, you know, to
yeah,
the process.
So when you talk to people about your work, do you talk about symbolism and representation and color?
I talk about little stories.
Stories, narrative?
Little stories, yes, 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 yes. But I have to talk about the process too, because at the end, it's very physical art. It could be very tiring to be painting or making sculptures. So yeah, I think both are, are connected, and it's, but. I don't believe that I've seen a video of Picasso when he was doing Guernica, and he was painting on a mirror. Well, so you can see what he was really painting, because he was painting. And I don't think, even if you watch someone creating, you cannot.
You cannot get away from the process. Yes.
No,
Yep.
yes, it won't be the same. Whatever you see, there's something else. There's some magic somewhere that is
Yeah.
personal to everyone.
Yeah, and it's very strong. You know, we all come back to it as at some point, because well,
Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about your drawing. Your drawing skills are so strong. And I see even when you're painting, when you're forming the fiber, they're like expanded drawings. I'd love to just see some of your pen and ink drawings on exhibit as well. Have you done that in the past, or?
the ones that I showed right after I showed the sculptures,
Mm-hmm.
the ink drawings that looked like little species,
Right.
I've shown those. I also showed a series of drawings that were 9 by 9, and then I scanned them up to 17 by 17 inches, and I did an installation. They were all very gestural. Mandala, no, not mandala, circular or radial.
Mm-hmm.
And they had certain relationships to them, and I sort of hint or make a nod to science, because I displayed them like you would the periodic table. But as far as specific to your questions, I have not really shown just drawings for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a lot of them here at home. You know, they don't come together in a series for me. I'm looking for things that
fit.
Maybe I need a curator. Maybe I need somebody to come in and go, all of those would work, and we put those and those and those together. And
oh, I'd be happy to come over when it's safe, and we could do that. We could play.
Okay. And then I that would be fun, because I do that's what I started out with. I started out with graphite drawings. My mother gave me lessons because the school I went to had no art program, so she gave me private drawing lessons, and in the tradition of observation and representation. And I'm inclined to be very meticulous, so a lot of my very first drawings were very tight. And then my dog, this then translated into printmaking, which was my undergraduate degree. And the series of work that I had two bodies of work that I was trying to figure out which one was going to be my graduating show. Mm-hmm. One was in linoleum, and the other one was in lithography. And I chose the linoleum one because of the lithography one. was so time and labor intensive, but it allowed me to make a drawing, you know. And as I've gotten older, my drawings go from very loose to very tight and kind of like on a mood basis. But in general, I tend to more loose drawings.
I think you and Brian Boone could have an interesting conversation because I don't know if I know anyone more meticulous about line than Brian. But it would be interesting, you know, because you both are very concerned about detail and preciseness. Brian, do you want to comment on your drawing, or, you know, do you ever have times where you just really loosen up, or are you pretty focused on the meticulous nature of your line?
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts, and sorry I had to pop in a little late. I was on another work call, unfortunately. I think there's, yes, most of my work, especially as you see it finally presented, the blocking of the color is very precise, but often in some way there is some kind of loose work that's done, especially at the outset. So some of the recent work where the color blocks are completely solid and the lines are very meticulous, if you look at them, there's a texture that's laid down that is a little bit more, you know, a little bit more automatic, a little bit more free form, that builds up an organic and a little bit more, not circular, but just with curves in it, little curvilinear shapes in it. And then some of the works where the blocks are very precise on the edges, the color fills will have these kind of textures running through them where I've done multiple layers with different levels of translucency. So there is a little bit of, even within the tight conformity, there's a little bit of a loose and a free form motion to some of it.
You know, I remember, do you remember me coming to your lecture at your talk at Untitled?
Yes.
And you were showing me, and you remember how interested I was in all those small maquettes and textural pieces.
And those, that was, at that time, I was having such a hard time with the printing process. But interestingly, despite the fact that I was having those problems with the printing element, I was still taking quite a bit of advantage of the time that I had there in this, you know, meditative space to work on these other things. And some of those sculptural forms that I just was playing around with, they've ended up informing some of where I'm going in both the painting work and a lot of stuff that's getting built up in the back end in sculpture. There's pieces of metal that are cut somewhere, you know, in the city right now that will end up on sculptures, slowed down a little bit by COVID, but those are having an effect. And those comments and the feedback I got about them did help me to move down that line. So thank you for that.
They were, I was just thinking they were, it was very interesting to see you, you know, spend that time and have seen your other work. And, you know, it resonated with me when you said they inform. And I think as artists who work and we work in a vein and we develop that, and then we might be interested in working in another vein, we can't help but have those influence each other. And I want to ask George if he has had that experience, and he would talk about that.
Well, actually in the last several years, I've worked both my usual figurative and non-objective. But what you talked about, process, that's very much what I do in the studio. A lot of times I don't know, I start something, but it's transformed. So even though we work in very different ways, the whole process and the emotional and the intellectual come in, and I don't know where I'm going to end up. And I love that adventure. It's an adventure, and I can easily destroy something that I've worked months and months on just because I can't handle it anymore. So it goes in another direction. And I was been thinking about this lately, just the whole, since we are kind of isolated, it's nice to travel in our studios. I mean, it's like the spaceship enterprise that we are fortunate to have, you know, to do those kind of travels. And even though we're limited to some of the outside world, we have always been engaged in our interworlds. And, you know, again, my work is different than yours and Brian, and, you know, speaking about Brian, I've always been into that type of hard edge work, even though for me, I can't go too hard edge anymore. I have to mess it up. I have to like react. It's just too clean for me when I'm working on my own work, even though some of my abstract work has to do with straight lines and zones. You know, it's about deconstruction at the same time. So, but my overall feeling about your talk is I identify with your process, you know, and we all come to a different conclusion. That's why we're all individuals. But I very much appreciate listening to other people's process and thoughts, and of course emotions come into it big time. And I noticed that you use your hands, so do I.
And
You know,
we need to have you do one of these soon too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, I need Mark. That's all I get to say.
you know, the emotions thing, we're all different types of people, but sometimes it's really hard to show and share those emotions, and it's much easier to make something and talk about something that is seemingly unrelated. So being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Well, I'm conscious of our time, and Elizabeth, I want to thank you so much
comment.
for sharing today.
Before we go, I want to make one comment.
Sure.
George won first place down at the Goddard Center for his painting. That is up, I think it's up right now, but his first place gives him a lobby show next year. So he'll have the entire one person kind of a show in 1 year from now. Just FYI.
Which is wonderful.
I didn't win anything, but he won first place. So that's worth it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Congratulations again, George. That's great news.
Thanks.
And just for everybody, you know, times have changed since we first started doing these Zooms, and people have gone back to work and all of that. Just for the group here, is there a day or time that works better for everyone? Is it better to do these on the weekends? Or does this time still work for some of you?
This time works for me until school starts, which is the 17th.
The 17th, okay.
Yeah, and then Fridays we have faculty meetings.
Okay. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've had a number of programs that have launched in the last few weeks at work that have caused a lot of conference calls. And I don't know why people have started insisting on scheduling things around lunchtime for work, when it was always my free time. I don't know, I've been thinking about that, and I don't have a good answer right now because things keep shifting. Every time I think I've identified a new good time, there's some new status meeting that moves into that spot.
And
I'll reply back in an email once I think about it more.
Okay, well, if you all would think about it and get back to me, and I'll probably send a doodle poll out to everyone of the consigned artists. And I'm sensing that right now, a lot of the external people who were joining have gone on back to work and into their lives. But the artists have said several times that they enjoy these meetings, these virtual meetings, and until we can, you know, meet together. Do you sense that it is good for the artist if we kind of focus in on this is a conversation time for the artist to share with one another. Does that sound like a good platform?
I really like the conversational aspect. So
Okay,
I do as well.
okay.
Yeah, me too.
We'll certainly take that into consideration. And then any of you who are in Oklahoma City, please come by. We reopened 11 to 4, Thursday to Saturday. Send people in. We're trying our best to get the digital platform moving and getting people accustomed to looking at art and buying art online. But we have to do both to be successful. So,
Has everyone here seen the virtual gallery?
Yes.
I just took a look at it this morning. It looked really impressive.
yeah,
You
it's
can
a
come-
We're not talking about artsy. We're
No.
talking about
virtual
This
gallery.
was a video that I saw.
Mhm.
on her
There's a
website.
video. There's a promotional video, but if you go to our website, you can enter into the virtual gallery. And it's actually a template of our gallery space, but what we're doing is putting on each exhibition. The online exhibitions from Artsy are in the gallery space. And then where we have the black door at the back, we've expanded it into this huge atrium with rooms for every artist to show their consigned work with links to Artsy for the sale.
can you send, you have the opening times on the gallery, on the website, right?
Yes.
The homepage of the website. Homepage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. But it would be very helpful. Mark has been so instrumental in helping this developer from Belfast, who Noel connected us to, who developed the virtual gallery. So any feedback would be really, really helpful, because we'll continue adding shows, adding artists, adding work. This is just our first. We wanted to just get it up and get it moving, and we know things will need to be tweaked along the way. So
I'll do that.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you for coming.
Nice to see everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Nice to see
Bye.
you, Elizabeth.
Bye.